just between the two of us, we don't really laugh at the jokes.
Yeah.
So let's try and get it with.
It's good to know.
Oh, the mics are on. Okay, right.
to know.
Okay. Mariano, are you a banker or a VC? I was wondering that in the.
That's a good question. I think I'm not one nor the other.
Right. Tell us about the idea. I mean, you're giving your business away, aren't you?
Well, look, the change will happen whether we want it or not. So it's on us to find ways to stay relevant and collaborate with this, change that's happening.
Right.
Before, as you say, we lose the business to someone else.
Okay. Samir, tell us about. Let's go back a bit, if we may, in terms of why did this romance begin? What happened first to sort of? I mean, presumably, when you were sat around, sort of in your startup phase, you were looking at banks as your lunch. I mean, when did it flip to think? Well, actually, there could be more of a collaboration in play.
I think it's been a gradual process and just a maturing, I would say, on both sides. In the early days, we're not scared to admit we were very anti-bank. Took out adverts in the newspapers, being quite aggressive. And I think what we've understood over time is that what we really want Funding Circle to be is just part of the infrastructure.
Right.
Very similar to say the London Stock Exchange. The London Stock Exchange for business loans, or the New York Stock Exchange for business loans. And that means that we need to, be partnered with the institutions that are part of the existing
But what's it like when you're
system.
working with a really big institution like this? I mean, presumably there is a very strong startup culture running through your business. I mean, do you find that you find some of that in Santander when you work with them?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, if you look at Santander, they've been one of the more forward-thinking banks in this area, especially on the SME side. Mariano is sitting here with a VC fund. Not many banks are doing that. And look, we work with a variety of different participants, the government, right the way from central government to local government. We work with banks, we work with other partners. So, we've pretty much, kind of seen it all.
I mean, Mariano, some would accuse you of having shown some cynicism here, getting off the books some of your small business responsibilities. I mean, is this more than that? Is this about getting rid of the unlendables, or is it about sort of the growth market?
No, on the contrary, I think these are very lendable clients that, for one reason or another, we are not able to sort of, further our lending relationship with them, but we still care about the relationship, and so we're looking at different ways where we can partner with companies like Funding Circle to keep that relationship going.
Right.
And to cater to our clients' needs, right?
Is there a tipping point? I mean, in Samir's bio, I was saying about a business that sort of aims to have 10 to 20% of the small business market. I mean, presumably that's a bigger business ultimately than Santander currently has in the small business lending market.
Yeah, but I would say that, I mean, the SME market here and in any other geography is big enough. We actually, focus on a fairly narrow sliver of that market, right?
Right.
And I think whether those clients want to stay just with the bank or want to go to alternative platforms or want to find a hybrid model will be a question of how good we are at catering for the overall relationship.
Right. I mean, and Samir, quite often this whole sort of debate falls within the sort of big and small, big helping small, small helping big. I mean, can you characterize some of that for us in terms of what it's like, from your side of the fence?
Well, I think, the way we kind of think about it is a bit like what I said, but, we want to be this part of the infrastructure, this exchange. And on both sides, that means we have thousands of retail investors or people like you and me that lend through the platform. Mm-hmm. But we also have big lenders now as well. So we have institutions, mutual funds, hedge funds, the government. And on the borrowing side, we want a variety of different sources. So, with the question you asked, Mariano, we have had a number of businesses that have come through as part of this partnership where, Santander may be willing to lend them a certain amount of money, but they need a little bit more for their plans.
And are you meeting on a strategic level to actually look at how you assess the market, or is this just a more commodity type sort of relationship?
Well, I mean, we have a number of different meetings with, Santander Risk Director has been very kind to give us his time as well, and we've looked at various ways that we can promote the partnership further. But, ultimately, we are also doing the same thing as well.
Right. And I mean, a number of other fellow banks are starting to look at this market in just the same way, sort of putting relationships together. I mean, give us a sense of FinTech in the mindset of a major player, a major bank at the moment. What are they thinking about when they think about this sector?
Well, I think it's part of what I was saying before, right? This is going to happen whether we want it or not. As someone in a previous panel was saying, this is not the good guys versus the bad guys. Banking has been effectively all about networking forever, and so there are new entrants in that network, and we have to learn how to help them come into a network because they're going to help us do better business.
Right.
And sure,
So this is more about opportunity than responsibility, right? In terms of the way
I think it's a bit of both, right?
Right.
We've gone through many learnings through the different crises and ebbs and flows of the market. Compliance, how to do credit underwriting, KYC, AML. These are all things that we've already learned the hard way, and it's easy for us to share with the new entrants.
Right. And do you have a shared view as two organisations about how far and how fast this sector can develop? I mean, is that the sort of conversation you guys have? Samir, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, we've had numerous conversations, and the views won't always align. But we talked about 10 to 20% of the market. If you look at the US, the mid-corporate private placement market, which is basically where medium-sized businesses go to borrow money, is actually 70% of that market. So there's a complete range of how big this type of model can be, and we're all, me in particular, think it can get even bigger than that. But the central thing of this is that there are always going to be banks in the system.
Right.
I think as an early startup, we might have said, we're going to take everything, and I think there's been a maturing on our side. Equally, a lot of banks in the early days were very dismissive of what we were doing, and I think there's been a maturing there as well. So I think, there will always be banks, and there will always be a funding circle.
I mean, has somebody like Samir made your role possible, Mariano, or was that role always in play in terms of a more, I guess, forward-looking, aggressive look at the market? I mean, the VC side is not something you hear a lot about, sort of major names in banking.
I would think of my role as an enabler for what
Right.
Samir and others are trying to do.
But I suppose my question really is this: is that has the sort of arrival of FinTech created you within the bank, or did the bank create you to actually go out and find FinTech?
Well, I mean, we call it FinTech now, but Santander and other banks have been acquiring and participating in other business for 20, 30, 40 years. Right?
Right.
This is just sort of the latest reincarnation of that.
Mm-hmm.
We're getting more granular, we're getting more specific, we're trying to get also more agile to sort of be able to match their speed and flexibility, and we're trying to find new ways to collaborate. So maybe before you would see full acquisitions, and I think that banks are moving, away from full acquisitions because they realize that kills innovation.
Yeah.
We need to find better ways to do that. And so my role is sort of part of that continuous evolution of how we take that innovation in.
Right. And that evolution, next stages, next steps, I mean, what do you both see as being, what could we look forward to if we were here this time next year, if you were to put your sort of crystal ball on something? What do you think we'll be talking about?
Well, I kind of
this
don't
time
want to
last
give away
year,
too much. Really.
you were sort of apple in the eye type thing. Where, it's sort of, this has been moving on at pace.
Yeah, I think, from my side, what I'd hope is that you'd see businesses like Funding Circle, just become more and more part of the infrastructure. That means partnered with, there'll be more and more partners that will engage with this type of activity, and we've seen that already. We've taken our business global, so we operate in both the UK and the US. Now doing over $10 million a month of lending
Right.
in the US.
Will you go a lot further than small business? I mean, do you see that that's is that the sort of the hinterland, or are there going to be other parts of the economy you're going to look at?
We're very focused on small business. That's the and it would have probably been a hell of a lot easier to take the business into consumer loans or other things within the UK than try and go over to the US, and I'd probably be a lot less jet lagged than I am now. But
so why is that? Why not? I mean, is it something which is a heart and soul issue, or is it more of a kind of commercial judgment?
I think it's both. I think we like what we do. On average, when a business borrows from Funding Circle, within 6 months they employ 3 new people, they increase turnover. Everyone generally loves small businesses, so that they're happy to talk to us. But I think, commercially, we just feel that small businesses are underserved in every market we've been to, and we think there's just a huge opportunity. So, and really, that's all we know.
So, Mariano, I mean, in the scheme of things, these are still very, very small businesses in the sense of the sort of the size of organisation that Santander has, but I guess the image and reputation of FinTech is sexy stuff, right? I mean, where in the sort of the boardroom does FinTech appear at Santander, and what kind of priority is it?
So the head of our investment committee is the executive chairman of the board. That's how important this is for our bank.
Right.
And I think, to a certain extent, it is to any bank that has realized that things are changing.
Right. And are you a recipient of Samir's innovation, or are you innovating his business as well?
I think there's a sort of continuous exchange of ideas and iterations on how we can do things differently and how we can help each other.
Right. And do you change in this sort of relationship? Do you become a bit more, I mean, are you going to be a bit more like a banker this time, Samir? But chalk stripes, something like that? What's the future hold?
Well, I don't think so. But I mean, if you look at, the beauty of the funding circle model is, we don't lend any of our own money to small businesses. So we sit as this independent, in the middle. Our job is to grade these credits and make sure they perform in a certain way. And what that means is, in the long run, if you're a small business and you need to get a loan, you're more likely to get accepted through a funding circle than anyone else.
Right.
And you may come via a Santander, and it may be in certain cases they might not be able to help that business. They might be able to help it in part. But I don't think that DNA means that, because of the nature of what we do, it's very different to what a bank does.
Does this change it? I mean, in many respects, your business was forged in the teeth of recession. Certainly your growth pattern has been sort of very much where there's been a downside view about small business. How does it change when you're into recovery and growth? I mean, does that innovate the market? Does that make you worry about new entrants and arrivals? Give us a final sense, perhaps each of you, in terms of what does growth mean for FinTech and for your alliance together?
So I think, look, recoveries are generally good. More businesses need to expand and grow, and the majority of the loans we do are for that reason. I don't really worry about that, affecting the business. If you look at funding circle, about a third of the businesses that borrow through us at the moment can't actually get loans through banks and other parties. And as we get more comfortable with credit risk and assessing these businesses, that will increase over time.
Right.
And as I kind of said before, if you're a small business and you're looking to borrow money, you're more likely to get a loan through Funding Circle than anyone else.
Okay, last word to you, Mariano.
No, I think Samir is absolutely right. And growth means new companies, and new companies might mean companies that we just don't understand how to serve on the lending side quite yet. And collaborations like the one we have with Funding Circle help us serve those clients and hopefully learn how to serve them better in the future.
Brilliant. Ladies and gentlemen, do thank Samir and Mariano. Thank you.